I often tell speakers that no one speaks on a unique topic. What makes you unique is how you bring that topic to life. The stories you tell, the analogies that you use, how you inject your personality and style into the topic. What we're looking at today is as close to an exception to that rule as I think it's possible to get. We're looking at North Korea. Now, North Korea is something I think that many of us have this morbid fascination with. It's this enigma wrapped in a black box inside a black hole. It's something that we know so little about. And we know even less about it from North Koreans themselves. What we're seeing today is a speech on North Korea by someone from North Korea themselves. Now, apologies if I butcher the pronunciation of, I think it's Hyeonseo Lee's name. I haven't heard her being introduced. I haven't heard a correct pronunciation of her name. That was the best that Google pronunciation could give me. So apologies if anyone is fluent in Korean and hears me butchering this name. I'm going to go with Hyeonseo Lee for the moment. And Hyeonseo Lee is a North Korean defector. She's telling us about her personal experience inside North Korea, not the propaganda of the North Korean establishment, not the whispers and myths that we sometimes hear outside of North Korea. We're hearing it right from the horse's mouth itself. And Hyeonseo Lee's challenge with this speech is she's got to speak on a topic that most of the audience know very little about. And if they do, it's maybe some pop culture and myths. The other challenge that she has is that English is not her native language. And you can see in this speech that English is something that she's able to deliver in, but it's not something that comes easily and fluent to her. So with these challenges, she's got to think about how, in a 12-minute TED Talk, she's going to bring the topic to life for people in a way that they're going to be able to understand and follow, and be able to do this with her language restrictions that she has. I think this is a really great example of if you're presenting on a topic that your audience are unfamiliar with, and or if you are not speaking in your native language and you're trying to find a way to communicate clearly and help the audience to follow the message, I think Hyeonseo Lee does this fantastically in her speech today. Now we're going to be looking at clips and excerpts from her TED Talk, and this footage is provided by TED. I do not claim ownership of this footage, and this footage is for informational and educational purposes only. And the topic of North Korea is something we certainly need educating on because we know so little about it. And that's what we're going to hear in this TED Talk today, My Escape from North Korea by Hyeonseo Lee.
When I was young, I thought my country was the best on the planet. And I grew up singing a song called Nothing to Envy.
What we see at the beginning of the speech is Hyeonseo Lee launches straight into her story. There's no preamble, there's no fluff, there's no, hey, my name is Hyeonseo, I come from North Korea. That would have been helpful just so I knew how to pronounce her name, but that's a problem for me, not a problem for her speech. And this is, if you're stuck for a way to start a speech, this is the fail-safe method. Just launch straight into a story, pull the audience into the story, because the audience have seen what this topic is about and who's going to be speaking. There is already that natural curiosity there. So you can tap into that natural curiosity with this particular topic. But even when you aren't presenting on a topic that's maybe as appealing and as intriguing as North Korea, by launching into a story, you are pulling the audience along for the ride. You are engaging them quickly. So this is a great way to start from Hyeonseo Lee. Not going through the preamble, not going through the fluff, not saying, hi, I'm going to talk about North Korea and here's North Korea on a map. No, she's getting straight to the heart and the emotion of what she's going to be presenting on.
When I was 7 years old.
Do you see that visual on the backdrop? Escaping North Korea. It's simple, isn't it? It's just black with white text. And there is power in simplicity, and the visuals and slides are something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in this speech. But what you can see there, that's not a death by PowerPoint slide. There isn't a lot on there. There's just that little bit of text, and it's such a stark thing. And I think especially for when you're talking about the topic of North Korea and something that is quite dark, having that black backdrop feeds into that dynamic. It feeds into that vibe, doesn't it? So we've got some very cute, simple visuals going on there. Less is more. And the way that Hyeonseo uses her visuals during the speech is something that I want to touch upon a lot more.
We are lying on the floor together, and our bodies are so weak. We are waiting to die. I was so shocked.
Do you see that emotion that comes through there, talking about being starving to the point of death? And you can really see that come through, and Hyeonseo has to take that moment just to sit with that emotion and process it. It's really important as speakers that we're able to bring that emotion into the speeches. When we're talking about these challenging, tough, difficult times, we can sometimes try to keep a barrier and a distance between us and that emotion, because it is difficult, it is challenging, it is vulnerable for us to talk about. But it's through that sharing of emotion that we build the connection with the audience. We start to build that empathy and connection with Hyeonseo because we see how emotional and difficult that was. Now, of course, that's an experience that I'm sure almost no one in this audience, if at all anyone, has ever experienced anything like that. But it's not about needing to experience something like that in order to be able to resonate with it and understand it. It's through us as speakers being able to take the audience into that situation, to paint the picture, to convey the emotion, so the audience can get a sample and a feeling of what that felt like, even if they haven't been through the experience themselves. And that's what Hyeonseo Lee is doing here when she allows that emotion to come through, and you can see that it's something that she needs to process and sit with a little bit herself, but it's in that moment that we create that connection as the audience.
Because they were so focused on taking care of themselves and their families. A huge family hit.
Here we see some use of Hyeonseu's visuals again. Hyeonseo is talking about famine, starvation, and when you're presenting to, frankly, a Western audience, which TED is, that's something that might be an intellectual understanding of, but not a real visual representation of. So when Hyeonseo is able to provide these photos, it brings that to life a little bit more. When you think of starvation and you can actually see it in front of you rather than intellectually having to rationalize it, it makes that topic more vivid. It makes it more emotive for the audience. And this is how Hyeonseo is able to get over that barrier and that challenge I was telling you about of language a little bit earlier, is she's using these clever visuals, because you know what the saying is? A picture tells 1,000 words. So rather than trying to use those 1,000 words to describe something, when those 1,000 words aren't in your native language, why not just use a picture that does the job for you? So this is how we're seeing this clever use of visuals coming through. And I've got another example just after this that I want to point to.
This is a satellite picture showing North.
Now you remember that I say at the start of the video of Hyeonseo didn't start with, hi, I'm Hyeonseo, I'm from North Korea, here's a map of North Korea in case you don't know where it is. Now she's actually doing that map of North Korea, but she's doing it now to communicate and to articulate a point. So rather than it just being introductory fluff, what we're seeing here is this stark image of, well, how do things look like at night? And you can see the industrialization and the lights of the surrounding countries. And I said at the beginning of the video that North Korea is this enigma wrapped in a black box in a black hole. Well, actually, you're seeing a visual representation of it here, that North Korea literally is this place of darkness and blackness when there is all this light surrounding it. So again, not only is she using this picture to communicate a point, but this picture is actually acting as a little bit of a metaphor, isn't it? If you look at this and you don't have any labels at all, you go, there's something wrong with that big black shape in the middle. Why do the other shapes have lights on them and that black shape in the middle has no lights at all? So again, a really clever use of visuals to help her to articulate her point and also forming that visual metaphor in her speech. Metaphors and visuals are some of our most important tools as speakers to help to communicate our ideas and help the audience to understand our topic. And this is a great picture that helps us in a couple of eye blinks really understand what Hyeonseo is talking about here.
So they tested my Chinese language abilities and asked me tons of questions. I was so scared. I thought my heart was going to explode. If anything...
I thought my heart was going to explode. Now, the usual idiom that we'd hear in English is, I thought my heart was going to burst from my chest, or something like that. What I love to hear is when people reinvent a cliche. So you use something that's familiar, but you present it in a novel way. That's how you make your topic and your speech stand out. And remember, I said right at the beginning of this analysis that we're looking to bring a fresh perspective to our topic because our topic has already been covered. Even something like North Korea and being a citizen of North Korea, that is still something that some other people are talking about. So you're always trying to find, well, what's the way that I make my presentation stand out? How do I make my perspective stand out? And what we see here is a simple technique in which you can do that with. So instead of using the normal cliche, I thought my heart was going to burst from my chest, when people hear something that they're familiar with, the brain switches off a little bit. They go, oh, yeah, I know this. But when they hear something novel, the brain lights up and they start to pay more attention. Oh, this is a new thing. What is this? What does it mean to me? So by changing the wording of that slightly, I thought my heart was going to explode. She's still communicating that same feeling, that intense anxiety, but she's doing it in a fresh and different way. So this is a really clever use of language here from Hyeonseo, and I think particularly clever because she's doing this in her non-native language. And what you might be tempted to do that when you're speaking in your non-native language, you go, okay, let me just learn what are some of the common phrases, idioms, cliches that people use in this language, and I'm just going to learn them because that is going to make it easier for me to communicate and help them understand. But by being a little bit bolder and taking a risk, well, I'm going to use what I know about the language and I'm going to play with it a little bit. That's a bolder choice. But I think that when it comes to speeches, you always want to be trying to make that bold choice. You always want to be trying to make yourself stand out and look different. And that's a great example of this use of language from Hyeonseo here.
When they arrive in a new country, they start with little or no money. So we can benefit from international community for education, English language training, job training, and more. We can also act as a...
I think what it would have been really easy to fall into with this speech is when you have such a dramatic and engaging story, that sometimes it's just telling the story without a purpose. So Hyeonseo could come on here and say, oh, this is my experience of being in North Korea and this is my experience of escaping it, and just kind of relying on the novelty and the natural enthralling nature of that story and building a whole speech around it. But whenever you're telling a story, you've got to think about, why am I telling this story? What do I want the audience to do with this story? And this is what Hyeonseo Lee does here. She then adds a call to action. She goes, okay, so you've heard about my experience, you've heard about my challenges, you've heard about my difficulties of being in North Korea, and actually the difficulties and challenges don't end once you get out of the country. There's still a ton more that come after that. So here she makes that call to action of, look, this is how you can help. This is what people need when they're acclimatizing to a new country, when they're trying to bed themselves in, when they're trying to move on from the atrocity that they've escaped. So she's using this story to get the audience to do something, to get them to buy into something, to help them to be part of the change. And that's what we always need to do as speakers, that when we're telling a story, don't fall into the trap of going, okay, this is just an entertaining or engaging story by itself. and then just telling it, but not telling the audience what you want them to do with this story. So Hyeonseo Lee has added this call to action at the end. She's used the power of this intense, incredible story, and she's used that to direct the audience to do something after they've listened. For you and me, we aren't speaking on topics that are as novel and engaging as North Korea. If you're looking at a speech and wondering, well, how do I bring this to life? How do I make myself stand out? How can I present this topic in a different way to the other speakers who are speaking on this topic in my industry? Then I have a masterclass that can help you. If you want to learn some of the secrets of how TED speakers like Hyeonseo Lee are able to bring their topic to life and engage their audience, then I've got a masterclass for you. This masterclass is one that I delivered for one of the TEDx events that I've coached here in Scotland, and you can get free access to this masterclass. So this was something that I delivered live for speakers who were just about to speak at a TED event. And in this masterclass, you're going to learn what are those key foundations of a successful TED Talk. How do all of the TED speakers, Hyeonseo Lee is one of many TED speakers who've managed to bring their topic to life and engage the audience with their subject matter. If you want to learn how to do that, then I've got a link to the masterclass in the video description below. Click the link, it's free to sign up. It's just some extra continuous education as part of you wanting to come on here and learn how to present your topic in a more engaging and effective way. This video analysis is going to be able to help you to do that, and the masterclass is going to help you to do that. Click the link in the description below and you'll be able to access that 1 hour masterclass totally free. There's a couple of areas of Hyeonseo TED Talk I want to look at in terms of improvement. And I'd say that one of the big things that she struggles with is that she's speaking in her second language. And there are some areas of her speech where I think the comprehension and the understanding does suffer a little bit because of her challenges of pronunciation of English words, of understanding the syntax and structure of English language. And I don't want to go and nitpick through every single thing because frankly, Hyeonseo English is far better than any of my second languages and certainly my Korean. So I didn't think that would be helpful to go through and nitpick and say, oh, if she had said this in this particular way, that would be the correct use of English. So in terms of looking at feedback, I want to just focus on speaking principles rather than language principles. So thinking about, as she's delivering this in terms of a speech, what can she do to help bring this topic to life even more than she does already? And there's two things that I've spotted that I want to draw attention to. Here's the first one.
I was going to be arrested. As the Chinese official approached my family, I impulsively stood up and I told him that these are deaf and dumb people that I was chaperoning. He looked at me with suspiciously, but luckily he believed me. We made it all the way to the book.
So Hyeonseo is telling this very tense and dramatic story of they're sitting in this bus in China and these Chinese officials are coming on and she knows, oh gosh, I'm the only one who can speak Chinese. If they start speaking Chinese to, I believe it's her family that she's with at this moment, if they start speaking Chinese to them, they're not going to understand. So it's this really kind of it's almost like this dramatic movie moment. You can imagine this, if this story was made into a film, this would be one of the key scenes of they're there on the bus and you'd have the dramatic music coming underneath. Now, we don't have that type of cinematic toolbox to play with as speakers, but we do have some techniques that we can use. And what I think I'd want to see from Hyeonseo here is I'd want her to slow down and really draw that tension out. She tells this part of the story quite quickly. She's able to talk about the Chinese officials coming onto the bus and then finding the solution to that in about 15 seconds. I think that's too fast to be building up that tension and suspense and really drawing the audience in. So instead, I'd be getting her to slow down. The bus stops. My heart begins to flutter. Why are we stopping? The doors hiss open and Chinese officials walk onto the bus. I look at my family. they don't speak Chinese. When those officials speak to them and they can't understand what they're saying, we're caught and we're being sent back to North Korea. As the officials walk down the bus, I start thinking about, what am I going to do? I make up a story. When the Chinese officials come to me, I say, these people with me are deaf and dumb. They can't hear you and they can't speak. I look into the officials' eyes as I lie, praying that they can't see the deceit in my face. The officials look at me. They look at my family. And they move on. Do you see how when you slow down the pace, add in a few extra details here to build it up as well, but by slowing down the pace, by drawing out that tension, the audience gets sucked into that story rather than rushing through and saying, oh, well, we nearly got foot caught, but everything was fine. Just slowing things down, building that tension, draws the audience into that story even more. Sometimes when we're nervous, we are speaking fast. And I know for Hyeonseo, she's going to be a little bit nervous speaking up here. She's speaking in her second language. And sometimes when we're in that challenging situation, we're trying to get through it as fast as possible. She's going, okay, right, this is how I say it in English, and this is how I express it correctly. So she's focused so much on getting the content of what she's saying right, making sure that she just correctly describes things, that element of delivery is maybe getting lost a little bit under the surface. So that's why I'd be encouraging her to do at this moment, is just to slow down, draw out those details, and really bring the audience into just how scary a situation that is. Because for most people in the audience, they aren't going to understand what that situation feels like, of having the potential element of being caught and being sent back to an oppressive country. But when you take that time to pull the audience into it, even though they don't know what that feels like in real life, they can feel that tension and fear that you felt in that moment, and it helps them to appreciate that situation more, even though they haven't been in it themselves.
And without hesitating, the man went to the ATM and he paid the rest of money for my family and 2 other North Koreans to get out of jail. I thanked him with all my heart and I asked him, why are you helping me? I'm not helping you, he said. I'm helping North Korean people. I realized that this was a symbolic moment in my life.
Here Hyeonseo is talking about this positive moment in a story, about a stranger's kindness. And at this moment, so we're getting towards the end of her speech here. So we've heard about all of this horrific circumstances and situations of being in North Korea, her difficulties and challenges of trying to get out. And here we have this uplifting moment. We have this kindness from a stranger. And remember I said earlier about how well Hyeonseo portrayed the difficult and challenging emotion when she was talking about the famine, talking about being ready to die, and we really saw that and felt that from her. I would like to see that same emotion come through at this point, but seeing that different type of emotion about the relief, the gratitude, the joy, the faith in humanity, that despite all of these horrible people, there are good people in the world. There's someone who's willing to help a stranger out of the kindness of their heart. I want to see that emotion come through as well, because that type of emotion is just as important for connecting with the audience as being able to take them into that horrific, difficult, challenging emotion. We want the audience to understand how bad the bad stuff feels, but we also want the audience to come along the journey and feel that celebration and triumph and jubilation of being able to get out of that challenging situation. And here I think, although the narrative of the story lifts up, I feel like the emotion flatlines. So the emotion and the narrative of the story start to split away from each other. That this part of the narrative should feel more emotion than what we actually see. So I'd want Hyeonseo to be able to step into that emotion and be able to inject that into this part of the speech as she did so well earlier on. in her speech. And those are the two key things that I wanted to pick out here. Looking at how she can just add some of that tension and suspense to her storytelling, and how she can bring the audience on that uplifting aspect at the end of her speech. This is a unique TED Talk to look at. It's not the type of talk that I'm going to look at ever really again in this series. So it's a great example of, with a novel topic, how do you make the novel aspects of the topic stand out? How do you draw people in with the things that are new, but also how do you engage them with the things that they already know? So how do you have that balance between keeping them curious and interested, but also not getting them lost and confused at the same time? And being able to do that all in your non-native language is that additional challenge on top. But Hyeonseo had a few great techniques that's helped her to mitigate some of the challenges and barriers that she's had in delivering this talk. And how has she really focused on and amplified the strengths that she has of having this engaging topic, of having this open and receptive audience, and making the most of her opportunity in that little red circle. Making the most of that opportunity in that red circle to talk about a topic that matters, to talk about this issue where something needs to be done. And what can people do to help change, support, and improve the situation, even if it's just the small everyday acts of kindness that she talks about with that stranger. And that's what the power of speaking is all about. It's all about increasing that awareness in our audiences and providing that direction and focus of, okay, here's the issue, here's the challenge, and here's what you can do about it.